Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. I think it's undeniable that one must learn to seek power above almost everything else, and especially probably be willing to lie to gain power, because you have to compete with the elites on their terms if you're going to be able to beat them, especially considering they have the advantage. But even if there were no elites in charge, you would still have to contend with evil people who inherently have an advantage, even if they have no superior money or anything. That is, more money. Even if they don't have more money, they still have the ability to lie, while a lot of good people are unwilling to lie and are unskilled at lying, even if they're willing to do it. So if you learn to lie, you will keep things on an even keel. Then, as a result of being able to keep things on an even keel by lying, you'll have a chance of beating them. So perhaps the main question is, how does one learn to lie and gain absolute power, or try to gain absolute power without being corrupted by the means used to get that power? Because absolute power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So the more power you get, the more likely you are to be corrupted by it. Plus the means used to get that power, that is, lying, being ruthless, etc., this will corrupt you as well. So it's not just the power that corrupts, it's also the means used to get that power which are also corrupting. But perhaps the corruption can be avoided if people join together, because then it's not just you for yourself, it's you for them and them for you. All for one and one for all. But especially if the movement has certain goals, which have been laid out beforehand, basically this is the way you can keep each other in line, and that is how you would keep yourself from being corrupted. That is, by other people holding you in check, and you holding them in check. And this is how it could work, but how do you hold each other in check if none of you have any morals and you're all corrupted because of trying to gain power in order to overthrow the elites, or you're in danger of becoming just as badass? Well, if your group has strong principles that undermine corruption, then perhaps you can do it, such as this. You say that you're allowed to lie to everybody else, but only for unselfish reasons. You could say that lying is permitted by the group's members, but only for unselfish reasons, like for the furtherance of the group's large long-term goals, like establishing anarcho-capitalism. You cannot lie to regular people to extort money from them, for example, or to get sex from them, or to boost your own ego, or to lie by, to have fun by deceiving them or whatever. You can only lie to the common people to do whatever is necessary to protect the group or advance the group's goals. And you especially have to lie to other evil people to protect yourself and the group. But advancing the group's goals is the main thing that you would be able to lie about and do other bad things in order to accomplish, if those bad deeds are necessary. You don't do bad just to do bad. You do bad because sometimes it's necessary to keep from being at a disadvantage while competing against evil people. So if the group had certain goals, such as the abolition of government and the reestablishment of sound money, this would keep the members and the group as a whole from being corrupted. The abolishment of government and the reestablishment of sound money and the allowing of anarcho-capitalism to rise in government's place, and that is, not just getting rid of government, but getting rid of this government and not letting any other government re-arise in its place, and reestablishing sound money so that everyone uses sound money, unless, some idiots under anarcho-capitalism wanted to use fiat currency, but no one would. So, the abolishment of government and the reestablishment of sound money would benefit the whole world, including all the people at the bottom, especially, like the incels and the very poor and the homeless, and it would even massively benefit the people in the middle. And it would actually somewhat benefit the people near the top as well. And it would also restrain the elites from doing all the evil that they do. Evil such as endless war, endless propaganda, impunity, stacking everything in their favor, etc. You can undermine all this with sound money. You can get rid of welfare, even out the sexual marketplace, not forcefully. It's just that the SMV of women and men, and between high-status men and middle-class men, would all regain its proper value as the effect of sound money being reestablished. Sound money alone would fix the whole SMV being fucked up issue. It would reestablish proper SMV of men and women, natural SMV of men and women. Men's SMV will be higher, middle class men's SMV will be higher, and the SMV and societal power of women and the elites will be lower. There will be less gynocentrism, less tyranny, less wealth inequality, less waste, etc. There are many good effects from re-establishing sound money. So the group could have as its goal the establishment of sound money. The other goal of the group could be to decentralize everything, create anarcho-capitalism, anarcho-crypto-democratic capitalism. Not representative democracy, but direct democracy. And not democracy with the will of the majority ruling, but the will of the individual ruling over just him. and no one else's will ruling over anyone else, because all submission to any particular rules will be voluntary. Everyone will be able to create their own blockchain they want, or fork an existing blockchain if they vote against the thing that won the majority, right? And anyone will be able to use any blockchain they want. Everyone will be able to live anywhere they want, anywhere within the ANCAP country, that is. I say country in quotes because, under anarcho-capitalism, it's not really a country, but what else do you call it, right? And each area will be ruled by elites, which everyone wants to live. Each area in the anarcho-capitalist country will be ruled by rules which everyone wants to live by. That's right. They only live in an area if it has rules that they agree with. If it doesn't, they go to a new area. And if there's no area that has rules that they agree with, they go to the area of anarcho-capitalism of the anarcho-capitalist country that has zero rules. Like I said, each area will be ruled by rules that everyone there wants to live by. And if you don't like those rules, and you go live in another area where there's people who live by rules that you like better, or in an area where people don't want to live it by any rules. Different places will have different rules, and there will be major areas with no rules whatsoever. Or at least one major area where there's no rules whatsoever. You will vote by forking blockchains, by creating your own blockchains, by not using the blockchain, social networks, currencies, etc. of the groups that you don't agree with. The principle that Bitcoin works on is an example of the kind of real democracy that I'm talking about. People vote with with whether they're going along with Bitcoin's changes, and if they don't like it, then Bitcoin forks. And that's real democracy. That's voluntarism, because then no one has to use a currency that they don't want to use, as opposed to today, where the government makes a rule according to majority, supposedly, and representative democracy, which is even worse. But even if we're a direct democracy, it's still the rule of the majority, tyrannically oppressing the minority. But that's not what Bitcoin is. But you can fork Bitcoin as many times as you want to. And that's what real democracy is. That's what real democracy should be. That's voluntarism. That's anarcho-capitalism. That's freedom. No one has to do anything that they don't want to do. You see, anarcho-capitalism is totally compatible with this kind of direct democracy like Bitcoin, but not just with currency, but with social networks and ways the country is run through technology, like infrastructure and all kinds of things, right? Anarcho-capitalism is totally compatible with this kind of direct democracy that is totally voluntary. People will join certain groups because of the power of collectivism, and I don't mean that in a communist sense, but I just mean, people working together to do, the same thing. But it will be entirely voluntary. The collectivism will be totally voluntary. And there will be groups with no rules, and even the groups with rules will be far freer than the people of today are. As far as I'm concerned, all evil is permitted if it is done in the service of accomplishing these two goals. Number one, reestablishing sound money, and number two, abolishing all governments so that we can have anarcho-capitalism. And if members of the group are caught by other members of the group using the license to commit evil to accomplish their own selfish gains, to get sex or defraud people or whatever other evil goals they're lying to accomplish, then these group members these members of the secret society, this secret society trying to create anarcho-capitalism across the world, these group members who use lying for other things other than creating anarcho-capitalism and reestablishing sound money, then these people could be kicked out of the group or killed or whatever. Whatever would be necessary to silence them forever. I guess death is probably the best way. The mafia and other criminal organizations like the U.S. government, they use death to keep their own people in line. And I think it's a pretty good way of keeping people in line because dead men tell no tales. And if someone knows ahead of time when they join the group that that's going to be the price of disobeying the group's rules on only lying for the reestablishment of sound money and abolishing the government so we can now allow anarcho-capitalism to arise and not being able to lie for any other purpose other than that, if they know that going in, then this means that their own death that they suffer when they break the rules, then that death is on their death is on their own hands for breaking the rules, and because they knew the rules ahead of time. Their death is not on the group's hands, even though the group killed them. Because that person who broke the rules is the one who chose to break the rules, and he knew ahead of time, right? He knew the punishment ahead of time, and he chose to break the rules ahead of time. And these people voluntarily agreed to those rules without any coercion when they chose to join the group. And they were told the rules before joining, and they still chose to join anyway. So if they break the rules, then, knowing the penalty is death, if they're killed, that's not really murder, because they knew that could happen if they broke the rules, would happen if they broke the rules. So I think you can get around the whole corrupting effect of power. And by the way, you can't just kick them out of the group, because now you could do that with, a group in anarcho-capitalism, like in a city. If someone doesn't want to abide by the rules in the city, you just kick them out of the city. Or you can offer, okay, we'll give you a public whipping or we'll cut off one of your fingers publicly or whatever, and that's going to be your punishment if you want to stay. But if you don't want to submit to that punishment, we won't give you that punishment. We're just going to kick you out of the city. So you could do that, but when it comes to like a secret society where it's like really hardcore and based on goals, global geopolitical goals, and they're amassing wealth and power and doing important things and stuff, then this group, this small group, whatever it is, maybe it's only a few hundred people, maybe it's just a few thousand. I'm not talking like even a small town. I'm talking like a small secret society in favor of bringing about anarcho-capitalism, such as we would have to form this, and obviously this wouldn't be under anarcho-capitalism because anarcho-capitalism wouldn't exist yet. I'm saying like today, someone should form a secret society like this where the secret society's final and most important goal is the creation of anarcho-capitalism and sound money all across the world. The destruction of all governments all over the world. Doing this would enable the people in it to amass wealth and power and stuff, especially if the group chose the people on their principles and their IQ and their memory and their charisma and looks. Mainly IQ, memory, and moral character. All right, but if they break the rules and they know the penalty is death for breaking the rules, then you kind of have to kill them. And even if you don't, let's say you didn't have the death penalty for breaking the rules of the secret society, you just kick them out. They're lying to get sex, or lying for whatever other, to make money, selfish means, instead of lying merely to advance the goals of the group. That is, to advance, the cause of anarcho-capitalism coming about. If that person gets kicked out of the secret society, he could very well go to a newspaper or whatever and just expose the secret society, how they work, who their members are, what their goals are, etc. You pretty much have to have a death penalty if the person breaks the rules, if you're going to have a secret society, because otherwise its secrets get exposed. And that's no good. Yeah, and then once it's exposed, you're going to get the government getting people in there as secret agents and stuff, right? And then the government finds out everything the group is about, and then the government tries to subvert it or prosecutes it, arrests all its members, whatever. That's no good. Only way to have a secret society working for anarcho-capitalism behind the scenes is to have it be the death penalty if the person breaks the rules of the group. And you have to have some kind of punishment for breaking the rules of the group, and they have to have moral rules in the group, because otherwise you get totally corrupted by the power. You have to keep the people in the society morally in line, and you can only do that by having at least a few moral rules, like no lying to the group's members, and no lying to members outside the group unless it's to advance the group's goals, keep the group safe from the government, etc., etc. Because if you don't make them adhere to some kind of moral standard, the members of the group, they're going to get corrupted by the power, and then the group becomes evil over time. Maybe it might take 40, 50 years, but eventually the group becomes evil, and then maybe it joins with Skull and Bones or something, and now it's part of the enemy. And all that wealth and power that passed down, and all the networks that were, formed by it and stuff, fell into the hands of, people of the sons or whatever, the people or sons or grandsons or great-grandsons of the people who, founded the group to create anarcho-capitalism, and then these people are corrupt, and so they just join the group of Skull and Bones. Now, instead of anarcho-capitalism, they're fighting for a one-world government. You know what I'm saying? And they're in favor of fiat currency and stuff. So you got to keep the group moral, but the only way to keep the group moral is to have punishments, and you got to have severe punishments, like death, right? So, yeah. So I think you can get around the whole corrupting effect of power if you have benevolent goals. Not like the goals of the elites, where they think, we're going to create a one-world government, and it's going to be good, and we're the smart elites who can run everything, and you got to disempower the sheeple and lie to them because they don't know any better, and so we're going to run society how we know that society should be run because we're the wise elites and we know better. That's the attitude of the elites. That's the attitude of Skull and Bones and the Illuminati and the government and the multinational corporations, these scumbags. That's their attitude. They think they know better. But, the people in a secret society trying to create anarcho-capitalism don't think they know better. They're just trying to use whatever means necessary to bring about anarcho-capitalism so that everybody can be totally free to do whatever they want and act however they want and be free to run their own lives and keep their own money and develop technology however they want to do it and everything like that, you see? So it's totally different. That kind of view of we're the wise elites and we know how to force the sheeple to behave and all that. This is a very corrupting view because, number one, they don't always know better. And number two, they're very delusional because they live in this ivory tower and they don't have the sobering effect of suffering. It's because, they have good health, they have high IQs, good memories, they're not poor, so they don't have any suffering except for that which they bring on themselves, which is not the same thing as unwanted suffering. It's totally different, right? So they never get in touch with reality because they don't suffer much. And so they have no idea what life is like for everyday people. Plus, they have every advantage, these elites do. They have every advantage in terms of business. They can hire armies of lawyers. They have all the startup capital to do anything they want. And plus, basically, they're not trying to empower the people with their end goals. They're trying to make a better world by keeping themselves in charge and getting their goals furthered at the cost of the people, without empowering the people. All for some supposedly noble end where the people will benefit more too, once, a one world government is established. That's totally different than a group like the one that I'm proposing here. A group which uses any means necessary, lies, murder, stealing, whatever you have to do to advance the group and the group's goals. And all the people in the group have the ultimate goal of decentralizing everything, establishing sound currency and empowering the people through fairness so that their wealth cannot be robbed and so that they will have absolute freedom. And then natural selection and the best genetic specimens breeding the most will take care of the rest. It will ensure that evolution continues, and it won't be necessary to force people with the best genes to breed more and stop people with the worst genes from breeding as much. No, you don't need any of that crap. You don't need a tyrannical one-world government to force eugenics to make things better. You just have to have sound money, and then natural selection automatically takes care of all the rest. It makes sure the smartest breed the most and the stupidest breed the least. That just happens naturally under, everybody being prosperous, everybody having, sound money and total freedom. Then the smartest and most successful, most savvy, etc. will breed the most, and the stupidest will breed the least. But that doesn't forbid the stupid from breeding. It just assures that they're going to breed less. And then over the decades, over the generations, there's eugenic improvement of humanity. And as far as like what I was saying about lies, murder, theft, whatever you have to do to advance the group and the group's goals, mainly it's like to advance the group and the group's goals, and to advance the group not for the group's own sake, but for the sake of the group's goals. And as far as like theft, it's not like stealing per se. I'm talking about like you can rob women from the outside society, like brain drain, but like pussy drain, you might say, right? But you could grab all incentivize all the smartest women to come into whatever area that's maybe being run by the secret society secretly, a city or whatever. Now you could drain them of women, you could drain them of money by, not like schemes or scams or theft, but like more, I don't want to say predatory means, but which are done because the sheeple themselves deserve to be robbed because they have no balls and no principles. But like if there's sheeple who do have balls and principles, then you don't act predatory toward them, right? Like fucking married men's wives, right? Like I'm opposed right now to fucking married women, for MGTOW men to fuck married women, right? But I have also said in a video, I don't know if I released it yet or not, but I said in a video that I will be or am in favor of men fucking married women in the future once MGTOW's knowledge, red pill knowledge, about female nature and stuff and legal misandry, once all that knowledge is super common and there's not basically not a single guy in the whole US that doesn't know all about female nature and all about legal misandry and all that. Once everybody knows about that, at least everybody the new generation, and guys are still getting married anyway, well then those guys who got married after it became common knowledge, and therefore they knew better than to get married, but they got married anyway, especially if they don't get married in a commune, but they're still living in the world, those guys, they kind of do deserve to get, their wives fucked by other guys, because, they should not have gotten married. And if they did get married, they should have done the smart thing and gotten married in a commune, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's almost justifiable predatoriness to sleep with married women who married after it became common knowledge, after MGTOW knowledge and legal misandry knowledge and all that, female nature knowledge and legal misandry knowledge, that is MGTOW knowledge, red pill knowledge. Once that became became absolutely widespread in society and men were still marrying, then those guys are legitimate targets. Now, the guys who got married before the knowledge about female nature and legal misandry became so widespread that every single person in the country knows about it, those guys' wives are not fair game, because those guys married innocently. They didn't marry stupidly. But the new guys in like 20 years who will be getting married once red pill knowledge is super ubiquitous and everybody knows about it, those guys' wives will be fair game, because those guys are getting married when they shouldn't be, and they're fueling the gynocentric system by getting married, and they're putting themselves in danger, and hey, they wanted to put themselves in danger, so whatever badness comes to them, whatever suffering comes to them from being stupid enough to marry, such as, getting divorced because some other guy banged his wife, well, he kind of almost deserves it, you know what I'm saying? So in that kind of predatory sense, a kind of fair, justifiable predatory sense is what I meant when I said, lies, murder, and theft, that kind of theft. right? And as far as lies, just to protect the group and advance the group's goals. And as far as murder, not just like murdering everybody who's not an anarcho-capitalist or part of the secret society. I'm just saying like murder people if they are critical, like the way the elites murder people. The elites they kill huge numbers of people in war, but they don't like, murder group members or people who are whistleblowers or whatever. They don't murder those people left and right. I mean, they do murder a lot of them, a fair amount of them, but it's not like, 10 people a day or 100 people a day, are getting murdered because they're whistleblowers, because the elites murder that many whistleblowers. It's not like that, So I'm not saying like the group goes around killing shitloads of people. I'm saying like the group strategically, when it has to murder someone to keep the group safe or secret or to advance the group's goals, and there's no other way to advance the goals, and there's a particular key turning point goal that has to be met, then yeah, murder is justifiable, especially if you go to that person, try to get them to help you, and they refuse, and they're statist or they're corrupt or whatever, then yeah, you're justified in killing that corrupt person because they won't go along with what you want them to do, which is in the furtherance of the freedom of all human beings, right? So that's what I mean when I say that, the group could use any means necessary, lies, murder, and theft, to advance the group and the group's goals. I don't want anybody to misunderstand when I say that. So, which is why I went on that rant clarifying it. So, let's see here, yada yada yada. Right, like okay, so then like once it's established or whatever, once everything anarcho-capitalism, sound money is established, everything will be super eugenic because everybody will be having a lot more kids, and especially the smartest and richest will be having a lot more kids, right? Among the middle class at least, maybe not the elites or whatever, but. So then, and you don't have to stop people with bad genes from breeding as much. They'll just naturally breed less, and therefore their genes will naturally be bred out. And maybe some of the good genes in those low IQ or whatever type of people, like the genes for gentleness and morality, those genes will perhaps survive, right? Because there are few kids who do survive. Maybe they breed with higher IQ people, and then those kids have both high IQs and the gentleness and morality of the guy originally, of the father or grandfather who had low IQ and gentleness and morality. So now you get a kid with high IQ and gentleness and morality and stuff. So then, even the bad people's genes can, the bad genetic specimens can pass on their genes. It's just only their good genes will get passed on, not their bad genes, right? Which is exactly what you want. You want all the good genes to survive and spread, and you want all the bad genes to die off. That's what you want. And so even the people with bad genes do probably at least have a few good genes that will be passed down, because they are still having kids, just not nearly as many. They'll have 1 or 2 or 3 kids, whereas the people who are really smart and successful and stuff, those people have, 5, 7, 10 kids, right? So you don't need to sterilize people or force people with the best genes to breed more or force people with the bad genes to not breed at all. You don't need to do any of that crap. You don't need a tyrannical one world government to force eugenics to make things better. You just have to have sound money, and then natural selection automatically makes the process eugenic over time. It makes sure the smartest breed the most and the stupidest breed the least. That just automatically happens under sound money. So there's no need for hypergamy. There's no need for government. There's no need for tyrannical enslavement, like forcing people to get a license from the government in order to be able to have a kid. There's no need for any of that. So all such a secret group would have to do to avoid corruption would be to have those wise, benevolent goals of empowering the people through sound money and absolute freedom. That is democratic crypto-anarcho-capitalism. The people of such a secret group could hold each other accountable by trying to advance the goals of the group, and maybe there would be different factions in such a group. Maybe certain factions would be devoted to different goals that would be pre-goals that would need to be accomplished in order to later accomplish the establishment of sound money around the world and the establishment of anarcho-capitalism, and perhaps there would arise factions of the group that would have different opinions of which pre-goals are important and which are not. And perhaps some pre-goals would be in opposition to each other. But as long as there was no forcing of some members to adhere to certain goals against their will, then it would be survival of the fittest in terms of which of the pre-goals, the earlier, what would you call those, milestone or landmark or whatever, like those goals that you got to meet before you get to the main goal, right? Like those, which I'm calling pre-goals. I know it's not the right word, but I can't think of the right word right now. It would be survival of the fittest in terms of which pre-goals are more easily accomplished and which are more effective at advancing the group's goals of establishing anarcho-capitalism to sound money. So the group could not force, certain pre-goals to be pursued, but different factions of the group arise, and then it's almost like, groups within the group. And they're all working toward the goal of anarcho-capitalism, but they're all working on different pre-goals. And then, some of them will succeed and some of them will fail, and then maybe some of them will convert back to the other way. of doing it once, their goal fails or whatever, right? So the group is constantly like splitting into smaller groups and re-merging back into larger groups within the big group of the secret society. You see, so, and they could also, in most cases, probably still continue to find common ground when they're going down different roads of accomplishing different pre-goals. So those common ground goals would be advanced by the whole group, and this would lead to progress in establishing sound money as the default in society, and thereby disempowering government, and thereby bringing anarcho-capitalism that much closer. And allowing the different members of the group to pursue different pre-goals would be more of a healthy competition thing, rather than a cage match for survival thing. Because you don't want internecine conflict, because infighting is self-destructive to the group, and therefore impedes the accomplishment of the group's goals. And allowing healthy competition is far better for another reason. And that reason is that when you have the group forcing everyone to get behind one solution, then you have a situation where everyone is viciously fighting for supremacy in the group. Like basically the president position in the group, even if there is no official president position in the group. And even if there is no official leader in the group, unofficial leaders will struggle for unofficial supremacy of leadership in the secret society. And then you get coercion and blackmail and all kinds of negative things, and you don't want that. You don't want any infighting in the group. So the secret society would allow everyone to do whatever they want as long as they're working toward achieving the establishment of sound money and the abolition of government and the prevention of anything rising in government's place, so as to enable the people, the billions, to naturally create anarcho-capitalism in the freedom that would exist without government. And I think this would all help prevent the corrupting effect of lying, of seeking power, of having power, because establishment of sound money and anarcho-capitalism does not give anyone power. It just allows the freedom for people to accrue the power that their genetics say that they should be able to accrue, and that's fine. And of course, that's Darwinian. That's not Darwinian in like a cruel sense, but like that's evolution. That's, the ones that succeed the most breed the most, And of course, anarcho-capitalism won't last forever either, but if we establish it before the mainstreaming of genetic engineering, then genetic engineering can make everyone relatively equal, thus improving standard of living for everyone and greatly reducing tyranny and inequality. And under anarcho-capitalism, where everyone is genetically engineered to be roughly equal, people will make more or less money depending on how much they work, what their moral character is, how lucky they happen to get, etc. But if genetic engineering arises before we overthrow the elites and reestablish sound money and establish anarcho-capitalism, and basically anarcho-capitalism is what we had at the beginning of America's existence. I mean, not exactly, but it was way more anarcho-capitalist than it is like what it is today. We are way closer to absolute tyranny than we are closer to anarcho-capitalism. America was started out being way closer to anarcho-capitalism than being close to what it is today. We did have a government in the beginning of America, so you can't say it was true anarcho-capitalism or anything, but it was understood there was going to be few laws, and it was understood that everybody had natural rights and everyone was going to do whatever they wanted to do. That was all understood in the beginning of America. You know what I mean? That's why it's a republic. It's, like a free country. You can do whatever you want to do. Right? So America used to be very close to being anarcho-capitalist, but, what we become now is so far from what we were founded as. It's like, if anarcho-capitalism is a 1 on the scale of 1 to 10, and what we have now is a 10, then America was founded as like a 2 or a 3. It was way closer to anarcho-capitalism than close to what we have today, the monstrosity that we have today. So, this needs to be understood, I think. And it's why America was so successful, because it was so free. You see? If we don't get anarcho-capitalism before we get genetic engineering, then we, the 99%, will be utterly enslaved, as we will all, against our will, be genetically engineered to have the genes of obedience put into us, so that all men will be as gullible and obedient and submissive as women of 200 years ago were. Then at that point, it will be utterly impossible to fight back, because there will be no will to fight back, because we will be as obedient and submissive as women, maybe even more obedient and submissive than women. And so the establishment of anarcho-capitalism and sound money by any means necessary is the most important thing in the world at this point in history, and is the number one thing that people should be fighting for. And a secret society to accomplish that would be, I think, extremely effective and extremely salubrious for the group. And also, regarding such a group, it might be very wise to have an initiation ritual that is very difficult to pass, but one that is not immoral. In Dune, the Bene Gesserit tested Paul with nerve stimulation to cause extreme pain, but without harming him. That's a good test. I wish such a test existed. It's unfortunate that such a device as that probably does not yet exist. I think branding would be an insufficient test. And chopping off a finger would hinder coding, it would be too obvious, and would thus make the members very easy to identify. Maybe chopping off a toe would be a good test, or would be part of the test. Probably would not be sufficient for the whole test. Sexual tests get into degeneracy and would therefore not be a good test for a virtuous group like the one I'm describing. This is because the only kind of sexual test that would be a real test would be one that the participant would not want to engage in, such as homosexuality or something, and thus would be a corrupting and degenerate test that therefore the group should not want to employ to initiate its new members. So I'm not really sure what kind of test the community should use to get its members to be highly invested in the group and unwilling to leave the group or betray the group. But you would want to design some kind of very difficult test that would make it much, much, much harder or unlikely that there would ever be people who would leave the group or betray the group, or that there would ever be people who would join the group unless they were actually committed to the group, like, double agents or whatever from the government. I mean, not double agents, but, secret agents for the government, spies for the government, Like, you want to make it such a hard test that no spy would want to subject himself to that test, unless he was actually wanting to join the group and betray the government and become a double agent for the group, This has been Redshift. I hope you got some out of this video. If you did, then hit the thumbs up button. If you did not, then hit the thumbs down button. Tell someone about this radical MGTOW neo-traditionalism revolution sound money channel. Oh, and before I end this, let me mention, I think we need to use the methods of the elites, right? Like secret societies and, behind the scenes connections, and kind of maybe in a sense rigging things in our favor in a certain way, and having long-term goals, and having, tests to make sure that people are serious about joining the group or whatever, and are not going to betray it, using murder to keep people in line, lying to outsiders. This is also very Jewish, right? Like lying to outsiders, not spending money on outsiders, like making sure money comes into the group but then circulates within the group and doesn't leave the group. And also making sure that, the members understand they can lie to people outside of the group and not to the group's members. Although you want to be more moral than the Jews, and so you want to make it so that people lie to advance the goal of the group outside members who are outside people who are not members of the group. Like Jews will lie to people outside of the Jewish race, but not for benevolent goals, just to advance themselves or the groups or the Jews, or harm non-Jews. But the group should not have such a selfish, evil goal. The secret society, in favor of trying to bring about anarcho-capitalism, should make it so that they're in favor of anarcho-capitalism, total freedom for everyone. So they're not trying to destroy non-group members. They are neither trying to take advantage of them per se, or not for selfish reasons at least. So they're just trying to advance their group and their group's goals for the sake of everyone. You see how this is different than the Jews, but yeah, you can use some of the techniques of the Jews. You know what I mean? And same thing with the Muslims, right? They're allowed to lie to non-Muslims. They're not allowed to lie to Muslims, just like Jews are not allowed to lie to Jews, but they are allowed to lie to non-Muslims. I think this is a good principle to use, but you want to make it more moral than that. You want to limit the group's members, the secret society's members, to only lying about things that are going to advance the group, not to just lying about whatever they want. You see, so this makes the group both similar to the Jews and the Muslims, but also it makes them far more moral, far more virtuous than the Jews and the Muslims are. So I think you can use these kinds of principles of copying the elites' methods, copying secret societies, copying what the Jews do. Do this kind of thing. Copy your enemies, and then you can make yourself much stronger. But not just you, I mean your group. And you do need to collectivize, because, the elites collectivize. Skull and Bones is collectivization. That's a group. The Jews are collectivized. They work together. People who are in favor of anarcho-capitalism, bringing back traditionalism or re-enslaving women, even if they're MGTOW or MGTOW monks or whatever, these people need to start working together. Because only then will we actually get some real change, some real power, some real freedom, some real autonomy, some real prosperity, etc. But we can copy their methods, but without adopting their evil. We can copy their methods, but tweak them, change those methods, and make them more moral methods. And the methods being more moral will also make the people of the group more motivated, happier, more cohesive, and will make the goals and the group itself more sustainable. We'll make the group more sustainable so that the goals of the group can be accomplished, rather than just being subverted over time. You see, so that anarcho-capitalism actually is accomplished eventually. So, like I said, thumbs up, thumbs down button. Tell someone about this radical neo-traditionalism revolution, sound money, pro-MGTOW monk, but anti-fornicating MGTOW channel. Peace trucks for petty plutocrats and politicians.